My friends, there comes a time in every life when the shadows stretch long and the path beneath our feet feels uncertain. We wrestle with burdens too heavy to carry, questions too vast to answer, and fears that whisper, "You are alone." But let me remind you of a truth that stands unshaken. There is no burden you bear, no storm you weather, that God does not see. When we clutch our struggles close, thinking we must solve them by our own strength, we find ourselves growing weary. Anxiety takes root and hope slips through our fingers. Yet there is a better way, a way that leads not to despair, but to peace. It begins when we place our burdens in the hands of the one who holds all things together. Imagine, if you will, a child carrying a broken toy to their father. The child does not understand how to fix it. The pieces are too many, the breaks too jagged. But the child does not despair. Instead, they carry the fragments to the one they trust, and they wait, not because they understand the process, but because they trust the hands that work. So it is with us and God. In our trials, God's presence is not distant or indifferent. He does not stand at the sidelines observing. He steps into the mess of our lives, into the pain and confusion, and He works alongside us. Often, we do not see the full picture of His purpose in the moment. Yet faith reminds us that He works all things, yes, even the hard things together for good. This is not to say that trials will vanish in an instant. The storms may rage, the nights may remain dark for a time. But even there, in the fiercest winds and deepest shadows, His presence is a promise. The God who walked with the suffering, who wept at the tomb of a friend, who carried the weight of a cross, He walks with you now. What does it mean to place your trials in His hands? It means surrendering the need to control, to understand every detail, to see the end from the beginning. It means trusting that His wisdom exceeds your own, that His love is deeper than your fear. When you surrender your trials to God, you exchange fear for courage, despair for hope, and striving for rest. You may still face the storm, but you will no longer face it alone. You may still climb the mountain, but His strength will steady your steps. So, my friends, whatever weighs upon your heart today, place it in God's hands. Lay your fears, your doubts, and your pain at His feet. For when you do, you will find that His hands, which shape the stars and raise the sun, are strong enough to carry you through. Take heart. The one who is with you is greater than anything against you, and in His hands you will find not only rest but also the courage to rise and face the day. This keynote emphasizes God's omnipotence and creativity. If God can shape the stars, orchestrate the universe, and keep everything in perfect order, He is more than capable of handling your trials and difficulties. Trusting Him means acknowledging His infinite power and wisdom. When life feels chaotic, remind yourself that the same hands that hold the cosmos hold your life with care and intention. Often we cling to control, trying to manage every detail of our challenges. This keynote reminds us that true peace comes not from controlling outcomes, but from surrendering to God's perfect plan. By letting go of the need to micromanage, you create space for God's peace to fill your heart and guide your steps. This reflects the biblical principle that God's power is made perfect in our weakness. It's a call to stop relying solely on your strength and allow God's strength to carry you through. Your limitations are not the end, they are the beginning of God's work in your life. He turns your weakness into a platform for His strength. Life's valleys, times of hardship, grief, or fear are not places we traverse alone. This keynote reassures us that God is present, walking beside us through every trial. Knowing you are never alone brings courage and hope, even in the darkest moments of your journey. Anxiety often stems from trying to solve problems beyond our control. This keynote encourages you to exchange worry for faith, trusting that God is already at work on your behalf. Faith replaces the heaviness of anxiety with the lightness of trust, freeing you to focus on the steps God calls you to take. Fear can paralyze us, convincing us that our problems are too big to overcome. This keynote reminds us that God's plan is greater than any fear, obstacle, or uncertainty we face. Trusting His plan helps you move forward with confidence, knowing that no fear can derail what God has purposed for your life. This keynote highlights the beauty of surrender. When you release your struggles into God's hands, He steps in with His wisdom, strength, and solutions. Letting go isn't giving up, it's entrusting your situation to the one who can transform it. This idea reflects how God can take even the heaviest burdens and turn them into blessings. It's a call to see trials not as punishments but as opportunities for growth and grace. When you place your burdens in God's hands, you can trust that He will work them for good, bringing unexpected blessings from your challenges. Waiting is often the hardest part of faith. This keynote reassures that even in periods of stillness and unanswered prayers, God is actively working for your good. Patience becomes easier when you remember that God uses waiting seasons to prepare you for greater things. This keynote reminds us that God's timing is always perfect, even when it doesn't align with our expectations. It calls for trust that He knows when and how to act. Resting in His timing frees you from the stress of rushing or doubting, allowing you to live with peace and confidence. This keynote highlights the transformative power of surrendering your struggles to God. When you let go, you allow Him to take control and work in ways beyond your imagination. Trusting God with your struggles transforms them from obstacles into opportunities for His glory and your growth. No storm in your life, whether it's fear, loss, or uncertainty, is greater than God's power. This keynote emphasizes His ability to calm the storm or carry you through it. When you focus on God instead of the storm, you find peace and strength to endure. Fear often paralyzes, but faith empowers. This keynote encourages you to trust in the hands of God, who holds your life and future securely. Choose faith over fear, knowing that the one who holds the universe also holds you. Even in the darkest moments of life, God's presence provides light and hope. This keynote reminds us that His light can guide us out of any darkness. No matter how dark it seems, God's light is always there to illuminate your path. Trials are often overwhelming, but this keynote emphasizes that hope remains steadfast because of God's faithfulness and promises. Hope isn't the absence of difficulty, it's the assurance that God is working through it for your good. Trusting God's plan brings beauty and peace, even in chaotic circumstances. It's about believing that His ways are higher and His timing is perfect. When you trust His plan, you find freedom from worry and discover the beauty of living in faith. This keynote reassures you that God is with you in every struggle. You are never abandoned, He fights alongside you and for you. Knowing you are not alone gives you the courage to face challenges with confidence. Grace is God's gift to sustain, strengthen, and uplift you in every difficulty. This keynote reminds you to rely on His grace during hardships. God's grace doesn't eliminate difficulties, but it empowers you to endure and grow through them. Worry is a heavy burden that God never intended for you to carry. This keynote invites you to cast your cares on Him, who cares for you. Relinquishing worry to God brings relief and allows you to focus on His peace and provision. Strength is not always loud or visible. Often it is found in quiet, unwavering trust in God's promises. This keynote encourages you to rest in His power. Quiet trust is a deep well of strength that sustains you in the face of uncertainty and challenge. Every trial you face is an opportunity for growth and transformation. God uses challenges to refine you, building your character and strengthening your faith. Embrace trials as stepping stones toward becoming the person God created you to be. Even in the midst of life's chaos, God's presence brings a peace that surpasses understanding. This keynote highlights the calming power of knowing He is with you. When you focus on His presence, the storms around you lose their power to unsettle your heart. This keynote emphasizes the biblical truth that God cares deeply for you and invites you to give your burdens to Him. Trusting God with your worries frees you from the weight of trying to manage them alone. In times of uncertainty, allowing God to lead provides clarity and direction. His guidance is perfect, even when the path ahead is unclear. Surrender your need for answers and follow His lead, trusting that He knows the way forward. Trials test your faith, but they also strengthen it. This keynote reminds you that God uses challenges to deepen your trust in Him. View tests of faith not as setbacks, but as opportunities to grow stronger and closer to God. This keynote reassures you of God's steadfast support. Even when you stumble, His hands are there to catch you and lift you up. No matter how far you fall, God's hands are strong and faithful to hold you. God is always at work, even when His actions are invisible to us. This keynote reminds you that His plans are unfolding, even in silence. Trust that God is working behind the scenes for your good, even when you don't see immediate results. Letting go of control brings freedom. This keynote encourages you to stop striving and rest in God's sovereignty. Relinquishing control allows you to experience the peace that comes from trusting in His perfect will. What appears to you as a problem is often part of God's greater purpose. This keynote reminds you that He uses all things for His glory and your good. Shift your perspective and see challenges as part of a divine plan for your life. Patience is one of the hardest aspects of faith. This keynote emphasizes the importance of trusting God when His answer to your prayers is wait. Trust that waiting is never wasted. It is a time of preparation and growth as God aligns everything for His perfect timing. There are burdens too heavy for us to bear, but God's strength is limitless. This keynote reminds you to let Him carry what is beyond your ability to handle. Rest in the assurance that God's hands are strong enough to carry your heaviest struggles. Placing your worries and struggles in God's hands brings a peace that comes from knowing He is in control. This keynote highlights the freedom found in surrender. Trusting God with your challenges allows you to experience the peace that only He can provide. This keynote draws from the principle that God's strength is revealed through your weakness. When you admit your need for Him, He steps in with His power. Your limitations are not failures, they are opportunities for God to work mightily in your life. Trials test your faith, but they also create opportunities to deepen your trust in God. This keynote reframes challenges as stepping stones to greater faith. Use trials as moments to lean on God and grow closer to Him, knowing He is faithful. This keynote reassures you that God is always with you, even in the hardest times. His presence is constant and unshakable. Knowing God is by your side in every trial brings comfort and courage to face life's challenges. Struggles are not the end of the story, they are the process through which God strengthens you. This keynote emphasizes growth through adversity. Allow struggles to refine you, knowing that God is using them to build your strength and resilience. Endurance in trials comes from faith in God's promises and His ability to sustain you. This keynote reminds you to hold on to your faith, even when life feels overwhelming. Trusting God empowers you to endure and overcome any challenge. Pain is never wasted in God's hands. This keynote reminds you that every hardship has a greater purpose, often shaping you for His glory and your growth. Trust that God is using your pain to create something beautiful and meaningful. In the midst of life's chaos, God brings order and clarity. This keynote reassures you that He is the ultimate source of stability and peace. Trust Him to bring harmony and purpose to the messiest parts of your life. Life often presents situations that defy understanding. This keynote encourages you to trust God's wisdom and plan, even when you can't see the full picture. Let go of the need to understand everything and embrace faith in God's greater perspective. Life's challenges often feel like storms that threaten to overwhelm us, but God is our unshakable anchor, providing stability and hope in turbulent times. No matter how fierce the storm, you can hold firm, knowing God's presence will keep you steady and secure. God has the power to transform your trials into stories of His faithfulness and grace. Your struggles can become a source of inspiration and encouragement to others. View your trials as the foundation for a testimony that glorifies God and blesses others. Trusting God's hands means believing in His ability to act. Trusting His heart means knowing His actions are always motivated by love and care for you. When you trust both His capability and His character, you find peace and confidence in His plan. Instead of letting worry consume you, shift your focus to worship. Praising God in the midst of trials redirects your heart from fear to faith. Worship lifts your spirit, reminding you of God's greatness and ability to handle your challenges. Just as God was with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace, He is with you in your trials. His faithfulness sustains you through every difficulty. Trust that God's presence will protect and strengthen you, no matter how intense the fire. God provides grace that sustains you through every hardship, giving you the strength and peace needed to persevere. His grace is sufficient for every challenge, enabling you to endure and thrive despite obstacles. God provides strength for the present and hope for the future. This keynote encourages you to rely on His provision one day at a time. Face each day with confidence, knowing God is equipping you for today and preparing you for tomorrow. The unknown often brings fear, but this keynote encourages you to trust God, who knows the end from the beginning and works all things for your good. Surrender your fear of the unknown to God, finding peace in His infinite wisdom and care. Even in life's most difficult situations, God's presence provides comfort, strength, and guidance. He never abandons you in your hardships. Remember that God is closest in the hardest moments, walking beside you every step of the way. Trying to control everything can leave you weary and frustrated. This keynote encourages you to release control and allow God to guide you. Letting God lead brings clarity and peace, as He directs your steps in ways you couldn't imagine. Faith grows strongest in times of uncertainty, as these moments compel you to rely fully on God. This keynote highlights the power of faith to overcome doubt and fear. Embrace uncertainty as an opportunity to deepen your trust and reliance on God's unchanging nature. God is the ultimate healer who restores what is broken, whether it's your heart, dreams, or circumstances. This keynote emphasizes His ability to bring wholeness. Trust Him to take the broken pieces of your life and create something beautiful and purposeful. Trials are like a refining fire, removing impurities and shaping you into a stronger, more faithful person. This keynote emphasizes the purpose behind hardships. View your challenges as part of God's refining process, preparing you for greater strength and impact. In every trial, God offers a peace that protects your heart and mind from being overwhelmed by fear or anxiety. Seek His peace, which surpasses understanding, and allow it to be your anchor in turbulent times. Life's journey can feel exhausting, but God provides strength for every step. This keynote encourages you to draw from His endless supply of power. Rely on God's strength to sustain you, especially when your own resources feel depleted. God specializes in turning despair into deliverance, rescuing you from situations that seem hopeless and leading you to victory. And trust that no matter how bleak the situation, God has the power to deliver and redeem. God's work in your life is often a process that requires patience. This keynote reminds you to trust His timing and His methods, even when progress feels slow. Rest in the assurance that His process is preparing you for something greater than you can imagine. God doesn't waste pain. He uses it to shape your character, draw you closer to Him, and fulfill a greater purpose in your life. Trust that your pain has a purpose, even if you can't yet see the full picture. Weakness is not a failure, but an invitation to lean on God's strength. This keynote reminds you that His power is made perfect in your weakness. Allow your weakness to become a platform for God's strength to shine through. No matter how difficult your story may seem right now, God is the author, and He always writes a victorious ending. Trust that the current chapter is not the end, and God's plans for you are good and filled with hope. While we often wish for immediate solutions, God's timing is perfect and aligned with His greater plan for our lives. This keynote emphasizes trusting His schedule. Even in delays, trust that God's timing ensures the best outcome for you. God is the great healer, capable of mending physical, emotional, and spiritual wounds. This keynote reminds you to seek Him for restoration. Trust in God's power to heal and renew every broken area of your life. This keynote highlights that God offers wisdom to guide every decision and step in your journey. His guidance leads you to the right paths. Rely on God's wisdom, knowing He will direct your steps with precision and care. Even in the midst of difficulties, you can find joy through God's presence and promises. This keynote emphasizes the power of joy to sustain you. Let joy be your strength, knowing it comes from trusting God's faithfulness. Letting go of your need to control outcomes frees you from anxiety. This keynote encourages full surrender to God's will. When you let go and let God take control, you gain peace and confidence in His plan. God specializes in transforming loss, failure, and despair into something beautiful and meaningful. Trust that He can turn the ashes of your life into a masterpiece of hope and redemption. Faith often involves trusting God with things you don't understand or can't yet see. This keynote reassures you of His unseen work in your life. Rest in the knowledge that God is working behind the scenes, even when His actions aren't visible. This keynote emphasizes the unchanging, unfailing nature of God's love, which is present in every trial and triumph. Let His steadfast love be a constant source of strength and encouragement in your life. Worrying about outcomes robs you of peace. This keynote encourages you to trust God with the results, knowing He will bring about what is best. When you surrender the outcome to God, you open the door to peace and trust in His provision. True victory is found not in your strength, but in God's power. This keynote reminds you that He is your ultimate source of triumph. Trust God to lead you to victory, knowing His power is greater than any challenge you face.